Welcome to the Nordic Mythology podcast. I'm Daniel Farrand of the company Horns of Odin. As always, I do have to plug our Patreon. I know everybody's sick of hearing it at this point, and everybody probably just skips forward 30 seconds, but don't. I'm going to tell you, don't. Not today. Listen to me. If you can, pop over to Patreon/Nordic Mythology podcast and check out our little Patreon we've got on there. It's how we keep the show going. It's the literal lifeline. And we have some cool material. We have a lot of bonus episodes at this point, which come in the form of our Q&A that we do every week after the main show with our guests. We have an extra 20 minutes, half an hour, and they're a lot of fun. There's a lot of questions that me and Mags miss. Guests tend to maybe let their hair down a little more, and they're a bit more fun and jokey. You get the whole back catalogue on there. So if there's an episode you like, there will be that bumper episode that goes with it. So just pop over. It starts from £3 a month, literally the price of buying us a cup of coffee. And soon we're going to be adding a fun episode. Me, Mags, and Claire are going to be reading smutty Viking literature, which I cannot wait for. I'm so excited to start this. I actually saw one in Waterstones the other day, Mags. So
in Waterstones?
In Waterstones, it was there.
For our international listeners, that is like the Barnes & Noble of the UK.
Yeah, it was a typical Milner on the cover with two ravens either side. And I picked it, I was like, this is like a book maybe I would read. Let's have a look. Got to the back and it was just like erotic, well, not like romantic literature. And I was like, yeah, this might be one for the Naughty Norse is what I'm going to call it, but I don't know if
Naughty
that's
Norse.
what we're going with. That might end up being the title. But keep your eyes on that. That's coming to the Patreon at some point. If it goes well, we might roll it out as its own thing. I think it'll be a lot of fun. If you can't support on Patreon, a 5-star rating, positive review wherever you get your podcast. That helps new people find us. And makes us look good. Let's be honest. We like that. Let's get into today's show. I'm joined, as always, by my lovely co-host and in-house archaeologist, Mags Havgar.
Hello, everyone. How are we feeling?
Hope good.
Yep. Wow, you really rose to the occasion.
Oh, yes.
Well, it was I didn't know whether you were speaking to me and Adam or you were speaking to like people as a whole, and I was like kind of expecting this little everybody to speak back
you were expecting the audience who are not allowed to have their mics on. Or just
exactly YouTube live audience, tell us how you're doing.
Yeah. Or were you just like expecting the cosmos to just kind of like the cosmic energy?
That was it.
Yeah, okay, cool.
We have a magic-esque theme today. That's what I was hoping for. That sounds good.
And I will say I did not have a articulated conscious expectation either when I posed the question. I just threw it out there, and then whatever happened.
Well, there we go. And our lovely guest, Adam, I forgot to ask how you pronounce your surname. I'm so sorry.
That's all right. Hi, everyone. I'm Adam Bierstedt. I am a museum curator. I work at the Museum of Danish America in Elkhorn, Iowa, as curator of exhibitions. I also have a master's degree in Viking and Medieval Norse Studies from the University of Iceland. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank
you. Yeah, you do quite a bit online with history, I guess, in general. Mm-hmm. And I was having a quick look. It's Ludo history. You do all different topics?
Yeah, over the last 5 years or so, I've become rather of a generalist. Right.
Okay.
In 2018, I was like, oh, yes, I'm doing Viking studies. And now I do a little bit of everything. So I do on and off consulting work, blog posts, YouTube videos, and live streams looking at how media, museums, games, books, whatever, interpret history writ large. But I mean, my library is still mostly Norse studies books, and that still is what a lot of my projects, what I can get away with it, focus on.
Oh, wow. That's interesting. How did you get into... I think I've completely changed. My mind just goes a million. So I've gone from one direction of the episode, and then I've just gone, this actually sounds really cool. How did that happen? How do you go from studying Norse studies at Iceland to then kind of a general seems, I guess, what's the word? What's the, where's my brain gone? You literally said the word. Like an advisor to for history. You said TV show, or like TV shows, YouTube channels, podcasts, that
YouTube
kind of stuff.
channels mostly. Yeah, a lot of media criticism, a lot of like reviews stuff, but then also consulting work. So I got started actually while I was in Iceland.
Sorry, that's the word I was looking for.
That's the word you're looking for.
That's the one that got me.
Yeah, so my friends Red and Blue at Overly Sarcastic Productions actually got me into this whole thing. They were doing some projects with Viking history, Norse mythology, and we're just like, oh yeah, I've known them since undergrad, and so we're just asking questions as they were going through their research process. And we're just like, oh yeah, we know somebody. And that somebody was me. Eventually they decided to do like a stream of God of War 2018 and invited me to come on to sort of help talk about that. Then we fast forward a little bit. I finished my degree, COVID is hit. I am now bored out of my mind, like everyone is, but instead of starting to bake bread, I was like, I had a lot of fun with that. And so kind of picked back up with my own channel, asked them a bunch of advice, but picked back up with my own projects to start doing it on my own. And then kind of just followed wherever my interests led, whatever was coming out that seemed interesting at the time. Because, I mean, without having access to a university library, it's hard to really, really get into the academic weeds, but it's easy to get into about 70%. So above average knowledge on a lot of different subjects. So just took that research skill and was able to apply it to a bunch of stuff. And that project has led to various other consulting small gigs over the years.
Okay, my question has to be then, this is from a research angle, because there are going to be so many people listening to this who, because you get like I'm sure both of you seen the scopes of people that are interested in Viking stuff. You get the people who are the typical like Viking bros who are just, I'm going to read the memes. I don't really care. Vikings are cool. Like, not that bothered about the history, but also feel like they know a little bit and want to tell everyone the little bit they know. But who am I to judge? Well, but then you get the people who actually want to learn, but maybe can't afford to go to university or can't afford, like you said, they don't have access to that, the university libraries. And a question I always seem to come across is, how do you get this information? And I've struggled myself with things that I've wanted to find, but not really known where to look. Now, I'm in a pretty lucky position where I've had enough people on here at this point where I can usually message someone and be like, help with this. And that's quite a privileged position to be like, Leszek, can I just ask you this thing about this, Viking warriors?
Love the casual name dropping of Leszek Adeo in here. For those who know,
right. No, I've emailed Terry Gunnell before being like, I came across this thing. What?
Yeah.
Or Luke Murphy was the other one. There was a project where it's like, I've never heard of this before. Luke, have you heard of anything about this? He was like, no.
Well, that's Leszek does deserve a shout because he's always been extremely lovely. Anytime I've ever messaged him with anything, and that's like with guest recommendations or people that maybe I'm not too sure about it, and I just, do you know this person? Do you think they'd be good? And he's always been really kind and generous. So that's why I want to kind of shout him out there, Mags.
Oh, yeah, no. I was just having a fun gag at it. But, like, being able to reach out to people is the best. I remember for my master's thesis once having kind of come across the previous kind of head of the Skræne collection here in Oslo, which is like this massive collection of historical human remains used for a lot of kind of dissemination purposes, but also like researching kind of disease history, I would guess, or like how bones were, like what kind of diseases are still present in ancient bones and that kind of stuff. And I remember I during my master's thesis, I read through some stuff where I came across this interesting mention of this female Viking warrior, and it was stated very specifically that this one individual had been kind of biologically sexed as a woman, which I did not have a problem with. I just didn't have any other sources saying that. I was like, okay, well, this would be very useful for the argument that I'm trying to make. So I'm just going to reach out to the head of this collection, since I've met him a couple of times, and see what he has to say. And he literally, like, so I just messaged him, like, very, like, hey, I don't, like, I came across this. I don't know if this is correct, but, like, do you have any other source? Do you know of any other source I could look into? And he literally, within the hour, emailed me back going, oh, hey, yeah, I just went down and checked the collection. I don't know where this person got this information from, because this is 100% a biological male. Because I just reanalyzed the skeleton right now because of the question.
Wow.
I was like, what?
Okay.
Yeah, that was my reaction. Okay, which was like bad. Like I was sad that it turned out that it didn't pan out, that this author had apparently, like, I don't know where they got that information from, but it was cool that this guy was able to just be like, oh, interesting, I'll just go check, I guess.
Yeah, I love that.
And
But
I guess,
yeah,
sorry, I was just going to quickly tack onto the back of that. I guess that pulls us back into this idea of where people can look, because also at the minute, it seems to have come with the growth of AI. The amount of just AI generated memes that I'm seeing in endless amounts of Facebook groups of just bullshit. And it's so frustrating, because AI could probably get it 90% right as well. So they must be putting in some words just to try and get it.
Can I also just say, for those either live streaming this or watching the YouTube video of this, get the privilege of seeing 3 extremely disappointed and exhausted faces in connection to AI generated memes.
Yeah, but they're so wrong, and it's so difficult to have the time to say to people it's wrong because of this.
exactly, right. Just trying to be reactive, really, I found doesn't work. If someone comes in with a really strong opinion as to what things already are, we're never gonna persuade them with just throwing more sources at them. But to that earlier question on how do we actually get started with research, I found I have some suspicions who wrote all the Wikipedia pages for a lot of the Norse mythology entries. I don't know for sure, but especially their attestation section is really good. They get all of the most important poetic texts cited in some amount of depth using relatively recent translations. And so, like, literally, you're not going to hear this very often, but start with Wikipedia if you are like, where is this god or this figure mentioned at all? Literally start there. That's going to get like 85% of your mentions.
I love that, because you know what, Matthias Nordic told me that years ago. I was like, where's the best place to look? Give me some books. He gave me like a bunch of like who is it? The Norse dictionary. What's it? I can't remember the guy's name.
Rudolf Siemek's one?
Rudolf Siemek's, yeah. So he gave me like that, and like different versions of the Eddas to read, and he was like, Wikipedia. Look how Wikipedia. And I was like,
but I genuinely cannot state this strongly enough. If you are good at using Wikipedia, like if you look up Wikipedia and then you check the sources, like you go through the source list of that specific article on Wikipedia and you double check via other sources, Wikipedia is an amazing place to start. Like it is just so different from what we were used to, like back in, I don't know, 2011.
Exactly, right? It's improved so much as a resource since I was in high school. And I know, right, there's a good chunk of Wikipedia for Norse and Finnish studies that Alrik Hall has written. He did not do a lot of the Norse mythology ones. So I'm still trying to figure out who exactly did that. But whoever did clearly went to grad school on the subject.
Wow. Yeah, like I say, because, again, Wikipedia is just... I don't know, if you cite Wikipedia in like an online debate, everyone's like, oh yeah, Wikipedia. And they just automatically dismiss you. So it's kind of got that reputation. But to hear, people say...
Okay, but here's the thing though. Here's the thing though that I like with Wikipedia is that it's a difficult, challenging beast, right? So I would still stand by the fact that if you use if you reference Wikipedia as a source, I might raise an eyebrow, because the thing is, you could go into Wikipedia at any given point and change the information, and it might take some time before the information is corrected, if it even is. So,
Can you still do that? Is that a real thing?
Yes.
Yeah. There's a team of absolute power editors, most of whom are very well intentioned, that literally troll through the new changelog to try and vet everything as quick as they can.
Wow.
But it still is literally anyone can come edit it, and it can sometimes take a day or two for something to revert.
Wow.
Yeah. Haven't I told you the story, Dan? Like this is 5 years ago now at this point, but this happened to me when I was working at the Yellowstone excavation, where before we had okay, so for those who don't know, the Yellowstone ship, Viking Age ship, seems to be, was discovered on the eastern side of the Oslo Fjord, and there is another Viking ship, the Tuna ship, that has been found on the eastern side of the Oslo Fjord. Now, the west side of the Oslo Fjord has the very, very, very famous Oseberg ship and Gokstad ship, and there is a bit of like a friendly-ish rivalry between the eastern and western side about who has the coolest Viking heritage remains. And while I was working at the Yellowstone excavation, my job was doing the dissemination. So I quickly went through whatever was on Wikipedia about the Yellowstone ship at the current moment while we were doing the excavation. And I came across a sentence that said that the Yellowstone ship was 23 meters long, which I thought was really interesting because we had not gotten to the keel at this point, so we didn't know the length of the ship. But the interesting part of the fact that it said that it was 23 meters long, I'm pretty sure I got this right, at least it was that the length that was given was exactly 1 meter longer than the Gokstad ship from the western side, which is the biggest Viking ship that has been discovered to date. So I have no
That's
idea.
Such a nerdy troll, isn't it?
I have no idea who made this edit, and we were quickly able to rectify this because we didn't know the size of the ship at this point in exact metrics. But I am fairly certain that someone from Østfold, the eastern side of the Oslo Fjord, wanted to make sure that they had the biggest ship.
On that note, I do also want to specify my familiarity is English language Wikipedia. Your mileage may vary for other language Wikipedias.
Of course, and this was on the Norwegian one, should be said.
Right? Your Norwegian, Swedish, Danish, Finnish Wikipedias, in some cases, are going to be way more detailed than your English language Wikipedia for Norse studies. And in some cases, are going to have a lot of random stuff that there are just fewer people looking at. So take all of this with the appropriate grain of salt. And you can actually check changelogs on any Wikipedia page. So check if the same user is doing multiple languages, because that's usually an interesting sign.
See, I didn't even think about there being different language Wikipedias. I'm such an idiot. But I
single
can't
language
tell you,
speaker here, guys, but we love you.
That's it, exactly. I can't tell you the urge I have to just sneak into some kind of unknown Nordic Wikipedia and just write myself in there now, whether it's like Skalskapim or something, and just like write myself into something that no one's ever gonna, because as we discussed last week, Mags, that's boring. That's a boring part of the prose edit. I don't care what anyone says, unless you're doing it for research purposes. It's a tough read. Like, I get it. Yeah, I get it. If it's for like you have to read it, cool. If you just, I tried
it's
to,
not
and
something
I gave
you
up, like,
snuggle down with just to have a fun time reading.
So I tried it and I struggled. So I'm going to find a little part of that. I'm going to write myself in it, and I'm going to insert myself and see how long it takes for somebody to pick up on Dan the Dickbiter was the old Viking name that was given to me on the podcast. So maybe I'll bring it back and put it back on there. I can't even remember how that came about. As Phil said in the chat, y'all dick biter. And no one would know other than old fans of the podcast.
Oh my god, this is being live streamed on YouTube. Oh my god. Are you aware of the
That's all right.
possible
Don't worry.
Are you aware of the possible repercussions of this, Dan?
Don't you worry.
We aren't in the first 30 seconds. They can't demonetize us.
Yeah, don't worry. There's been, I'm sure thousands and thousands of people have listened to the original episode where that came up. I can't remember what it was. Somebody asked, there was like one of the guests asked us, what would your like Viking name be? Or it just popped up, and somehow mine ended up being the dick buyer. I think it was just that I said, look, if times came and we was at war and the opportunity presented itself where it was me and I had to survive and somebody's crotch was just there in the fight, then it's getting bit off. That was how he was born, I guess. I just kind of the ruthlessness of what I would do to survive.
Not even like a dick punch from below, but like an actual
no.
like dick separation using your jaw.
Phil said it was exactly that. So it's good to know my train of thought hasn't changed too much. That I'll do what needs to be done, and that is occasionally bite a dick or two. Who wouldn't? Right?
I mean, I will not say that I wouldn't do this because I haven't been in a dire enough situation where this has presented itself. So who knows? The possibility is absolutely still there.
So that would be my cool Viking nickname. Anyway, back to research. So Wikipedia, there has to be more than that though.
Yeah, the other great thing in COVID, JSTOR with a personal account gives you 100 articles for free every single month. You can't download most of them, but you can read them online. And they never got rid of it. So, right, JSTOR, yeah, it still is active.
I did not know this.
What is JSTOR for?
It's an academic database that mostly has a little bit older stuff. A lot of stuff from the 70s, 80s, 90s is on there. Less stuff from the last 25 years. But it's a massive academic database on pretty much any subject you can think of. And yeah, so they still have it. A for free personal account gives you 100 articles every single month.
Wow.
So that is a great spot. If you just need to get the sense of like what's the most standard, a little bit out of date, but still standard scholarly take on a subject, you can pick 5 or so of those and you take a look at them. And that is pretty low barrier to entry.
That I would say so. And also what's great, even though it might be outdated when it comes to stuff like historical research, like research from the 70s, 80s, and previously also like kind of built a foundation for the research that's currently being done. So maybe you might not get the most up to date of what people are saying now, but the people that are doing stuff now are basing themselves, whether they agree or disagree, on research that was done in the 70s and 80s.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. So, right, I think between those two, especially for Norse studies, you're able to get a pretty good grounding on stuff. After that, you kind of have to start spending money, which there's a lot of very fabulous books. No one on the planet can afford the Pre-Christian Religions of the North series, so don't even try.
But wouldn't it be great
find
to have
someone who has access to a copy. Mm-hmm. The 2,000-page ebook version is sure something.
Wow.
I have 1 volume in print of it out of the 6.
What? Why have they not reprinted it? Is there a reason?
It's new, firstly. 2018 to 2020.
Okay.
So still very new. But also I think it's Brill who published it, and Brill is the worst.
Oh, okay. Fair enough.
So it's like $400 for the full set.
Ugh.
Wow. Okay. Yeah,
it's brutal.
Lot.
I mean, you get a lot, but it's so expensive.
Mm-hmm. So what about things like academia? Because I look on there quite often and find some good articles.
Variable. Some folks are incredibly good about uploading their stuff. Some folks are very bad about uploading their stuff. So Alfred Jakobsen uploads literally everything he has ever written onto academia.edu. It's great. Terry Gundel uploads the titles of things and then doesn't upload the PDFs in any reasonable amount of time. So I'll be like, Terry, you said something incredibly relevant, and I can't find a copy of this anywhere.
Yeah, I feel like, again, not to just shout out Lechek again, I feel like I always see him popping up.
He's
with
so good about it.
A new article on there. But I think it's
Simon Newgård is also pretty good about it. I haven't seen his most recent round of stuff, but there's a lot of folks sort of in the academic cohort above me were really good about getting their stuff publicly available.
Simon's really good. We should get him back on the podcast, actually. That's just reminded me. I'm going to reach out to Simon.
You do
again.
that. But I would also say that academia is a really great spot if you know what you're looking for.
Exactly.
That's kind of it.
That's sort of the downside of JSTOR and academia is you kind of have to already know how to find what you're looking for.
Yeah.
And then it will give you that information.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is maybe
it's not like a Google equivalent in the academic sense. It's harder.
This is what I was thinking as a purely selfish thing. So I try to make videos on stuff and research stuff, and I've kind of always struggled to get in and find articles on maybe academia, and also just finding guests where I know that I've got a topic on. I don't know. Let's say Ivor the Boneless. I want to do an episode on Ivor the Boneless, and it's I try to go in academia and just type in Ivor the Boneless, see who's written an article, and I can never. I struggle to find, because often they have quite weird titles, or they're not exactly, Ivor the Boneless isn't just directly in the title, and I struggle to find somebody who then maybe has written an article on.
Yeah. What I do in that case is I start on Google Scholar.
I was just about to say.
Because Google's algorithm is very good at parsing that, and they use the same algorithm for Scholar as for the main browser.
The fuck is Google Scholar?
Have you not heard of Google Scholar? Take it away, Adam. Take it away, Adam.
Oh gosh. So it's just scholar.google.com. But it basically strips out all of their most of their non-academic sources from the search engine. So it's got sort of a list of databases they work with and a list of sort of trusted sites that it's scraping. And then it just pulls those. For the most part, it's often only the citations.
Yeah.
But if you're looking for the title of a thing to then go onto JSTOR and see if they've got it,
because here's the thing,
it's kind of perfect.
If, for example, I was looking on info about Ivor the Boneless, I would go on Google Scholar and just search Ivor the Boneless and then see, okay, what publications pop up, who has written about this topic, and then I might not get complete access to it, but suddenly I now have a title, I have a publishing date, I have an author, I probably also have where it was published. So even if it doesn't give me an open access thing, I can still start then to Google where I could get a hold of the source.
Wow.
Exactly. So I just did that here as a fun test, and the fourth entry was an article by Kristen Mills, who teaches at University in Oslo. Someone I actually am aware of, have some friends who took classes from her. So I know that she's a reliable, well-published scholar, but gives you a good list of names to start with.
You should
to
just
be able
send
to do
this
research to see who's reputable.
You should just send this exact the actual Google search, Google Scholar search, pardon me, to Dan, Adam.
Yes, please.
Dan,
yes, please.
that link is now in the live chat.
Wow. Okay, I'm amazed by this. This is going to change. We're going to get some cool new guests.
Dan is the actual live human equivalent of the star-eyed emoji right now.
Yeah, I didn't know about this. But then again, there'll be so many people listening to this that didn't know about this, that had no idea that Google Scholar existed.
And this is something, that I have to do in both my online work and my day job, because my museum's library is not huge. And so having to really get good at online searches to be able to build up that knowledge base quickly enough to be able to tell those stories has just been so important. And finding those little cheats to do that is just an incredibly valuable skill in building up historical knowledge.
And I guess again, sorry, Max, I know you were going to say something then. With the website that you have, when you're putting anything out like the blogs up on any topic, we're in a day and age now where they have to be squeaky clean, unless you don't care, like the memes we mentioned earlier, which are just the bane of my life, because I mean so many different Facebook groups for like promoting the podcast, but that means that my feed is filled with just bullshit memes that drive me mad every day. So unless you just don't care like that, if you're trying to do this in any serious way, you have to make sure that you cross your T's and dot your I's, right? Yeah. So that's such an important skill to have, to make sure you get it right.
Exactly. And you don't have to be perfect, right? There's been a dozen occasions where I put something out and then get an email being like, hey, so someone who clearly knows more than me on this subject, and I get XYZ thing wrong. Well, the nice thing is you can always go back and change it, like especially on tech stuff. You can go back and change it. Or if this is, a physical exhibit, well, you can reprint a label if you need to. You can go back in, confirm that information, and then continue to improve. So rather than saying you have to be perfect, really you have to approach it in good faith and make sure that you're doing reasonable diligence in trying to make sure the information you're presenting is vetted, and if you get it wrong, that you own up to that.
Okay, I like that. Yeah, because I think that's a fallacy.
Mm-hmm.
Fallacy?
Yeah.
Is that the right word?
Yeah.
My brain's not working today. There's fallacy of like the modern world that people really struggle to be like, yeah, I got that wrong. Or even just have their mind changed. It's seen as like a weak thing to have to change your opinion on something. It's like a bad thing to do that. Whereas really it's just growth, and actually I think a really good quality to be like, well, this new information has been presented to me, I now have a different opinion. But people really struggle with that, and they'll just die on hills that they're clearly wrong on.
Can I have I think there are multiple reasons to why that is, but I do remember an age of the internet where if you were caught out having made a mistake, even if it was an innocent mistake, you would get so maliciously dragged that your reputation, like, it would be used against you in such an insidious way where like your word could never again be trusted in a way. And I'm not saying that this is not the case anymore, because it 100% is, but we've kind of lived with the internet for longer now. So I also think that if more people, myself included, would have, like, if we're able to own potential mistakes we make, then we make it safer for it being okay to make mistakes. Because I do think it is like, I'm not saying it's reasonable to die on a hill that's obviously not like a good, like, based on good information, but I do understand the fear with being mistrusted or being scared that your reputation is going to be dragged and ruined forever and no one's going to listen to you again. But I also do think that if, yeah, like you said, Dan, if we open up, and I will actually then make, like, I will try to make a case for this at the moment. Not that I've necessarily made a mistake of information, but rather a mistake in what I have omitted, and I will publicly apologize to you, Dan, for not informing you about Google Scholar earlier. Because I should have, because that is my academic blindness speaking. I've been just so aware of Google Scholar since I was a student that I didn't even think about the fact that why would you know about it if you haven't, like, been in touch with it before. So I apologize, Dan.
So I accept your apology.
Thank you. And I hope we can learn and grow from this.
we can. But yeah, I've definitely fallen into the trap of just arguing my case, even though I know I'm wrong. I've been caught out, and I feel like, oh, but I've done the podcast for so long now. Even though I don't feel like I'm any kind of like, why is my brain not working today? Any kind of source on where am I going with?
You're an expert?
The words not coming.
All right.
Yeah, I didn't want to say like expert, but any kind of like just authority. There we go. You stole that. You saw me making authority with my mouth, and I know you did. And you took it right out of there. I was there. I got there. I got there on my own. I don't feel like I'm any type of authority, but when I try to like maybe say something and then I get it wrong, I do kind of, maybe not so much now, but I definitely used to get kind of feel backed into a corner of like, oh my God, if I get this wrong and admit I'm wrong, that kind of puts everything into disrepute and no one's ever going to listen to the podcast ever again because I got this thing wrong that I misremembered somebody saying.
Yep, I totally sympathize. And it's an extra fun thing, in a museum context, because at least in the US, people trust museums so comically much. It's actually a little bit scary. Museums have been almost completely immune from the generalized assault on knowledge of the last 10 years. And the most recent survey by the American Alliance of Museums still said like 84% of survey responders thought museums were highly authoritative. As someone whose job is creating museum exhibits, that's a terrifying spot to be in.
But I was about to say this when you said, if you get it wrong on a label, you can just reprint the label. And that got me thinking of, I don't think it's just Americans, I think British people as well. Because for me, if it's in a museum and it's on that little card that's numbered and says number 7 is a pin from so-and-so, this is what and it says it on that little card, I believe it. And I feel like that is what it is. And that's the information that we can really take. And I was going to ask, like, how often is that the case where you have to change something and it's maybe not correct?
Not super often, at least not in the exhibits I've done. I definitely have gotten things wrong. But
little flex by you there, Adam. Yeah, good researcher.
This is a force of not that many exhibits, but there are cases where I've definitely read a label and been like, I don't know if I agree with you on that, museum writers. But a little behind the scenes here is, of course, most of exhibit texts go through probably 10 to 15 drafts before it actually gets printed. Sometimes changing very large things in the overall exhibit narrative instruction. Sometimes changing very small things of you forgot a period somewhere. Just really trying to polish all of that work as much as possible to avoid that exact scenario. And I've been lucky enough to have a really good network of people who help consult with all the exhibits I do, so that even if I don't know, which I have not done an exhibit where I walked in the door an expert yet, ask me again next year and that'll change. But I'm working on a Vikings one right now that'll open almost exactly a year from today. So that one I already have all the research materials I needed. But for everything else, I have been lucky to have a very good network of consultants who I'm able to send materials to, and again, are being very generous with their time to be like, actually, you've forgotten XYZ really important things to this story. Make space for them.
Oh, wonderful.
So we put in a lot of work. Museum exhibits take, a small one takes 6 months to make. A large one takes 5 years to make.
Wow.
So it's like an intense road to try and make sure that we live up to that trust that people give museums.
Right. Okay. That's interesting. So when we say an exhibition, are we talking when a museum? Because again, this is for not just for myself, but for everybody listening. when you go to a museum, let's say the British Museum, there'll be certain items that are always on show. Let's say like the Sutton helmet. Would that are we classing that as one of these exhibitions, or do you mean I guess almost like a pop-up exhibition where they'll have maybe a section of the museum cornered off for Vikings this month, or like with the one in the Danish Museum, the Viking Sorceress, like that kind of exhibition. Does that make sense? I hope it did.
Yeah, absolutely. It refers to both, but mostly the second group. So the first group, there are what we tend to call permanent exhibitions. So the things that we still craft, create, really think through. What takeaways do we want our audiences to have? But then once it's up for 10 to 15 years. Really, we should try and redo them all every 10 years because we learn so much extra stuff in that intervening time. But there are some things in the British Museum that have not been updated since the 1980s, and it shows.
We've had a couple of
the
those.
The British Museum is very large. Yep. But, I sympathize with that so much, though, because if they have a collection of many, many, many millions of objects, even with an incredibly dedicated curatorial team, they physically cannot look at everything in any reasonable amount of time, much less answer all the inquiries, acquire new stuff, do research, write exhibits, travel to conferences, professional networking, etc., etc., etc. Right? Daily job responsibilities almost completely preclude going into the vaults and looking at stuff. And if you don't have time to do that, you don't have time to redo your permanent labels.
Okay.
The other category are those traveling or those temporary exhibits, right? Those things are open for 3 to 6 months. And those are the ones that, like, a really ambitious one literally could take 5 years from initial pitch to exhibit opening. And that will be some team's primary responsibility for that entire 5 years.
Okay.
So, yeah, those are very thematically organized, right? Often one specific topic, Renaissance painting or something, and we'll choose specific objects, borrow specific objects, and try and tell one really focused story.
So is that where it starts with just an idea? So let's say, we were going to touch on the Viking Sorceress, because I assume you went and saw it, and
yes,
doing the job you do, it stood out.
I was actually on a research trip for my job on a different exhibit, but was able to stop by in August of last year, shortly after the Viking Sorceress exhibit opened, and it was so strange.
Okay, so
it is such a weird exhibit.
So something like that. Would that just start with an idea of somebody says, I want to, let's make an exhibit on the Viking Sorceress on Völva's, and then how does that go to the end product? Is it a case of then you make a list of all the different items that you'd like to have in it? Because I guess your museum's probably not going to have all the items, so you have to then start asking people, can we borrow this, can we borrow that? What if people say no? Do you then have to change the whole idea if like key pieces that you'd like maybe you can't get?
Yeah. Oftentimes it'll start either from, conversations about what do we need. Sometimes it's kind of a diktat from executives of like, it's time to redo our Viking Age galleries. Or in the National Museum's case, their previous Viking Age galleries had come under some controversy. And so those ones are gone now. So they were like, we need to kind of redo this. Let's completely rethink our approach. And then you get your design team together. In this case, the Viking Sorceress is based around one archaeological find, which is the Fyrkat sorceress grave. So from north central Denmark, north of Aarhus, there was a ring fort with 30 graves in it, one of which was of a woman of uncertain age with a really weird assembly of grave goods, a pouch with white lead and henbane seeds in it, some sort of metal distaff or spit or something, right? Some sort of metal rod, toe rings, really elaborate box brooches, really fine blue and red cloth. And so it's like there's one grave here that's really weird. And that grave, most of the grave goods from that are at the end of this exhibit. And that's clearly like the conception point and framing device of the entire exhibit was that find, which is frequently interpreted and is actually Leszek and some of the other folks at the National Museum in Copenhagen interpret that as a sorceress, I think quite plausibly. So they started with that and then clearly built out. For this case, they built out by getting one of the directors of the National Theatre involved, which is quite extravagant. Casper Holten, the stage director, one of the managers of the National Theatre in Copenhagen, him and his scenographer, Stefan Orving, took a lot of opera design, like contemporary opera design, as a way to frame most of the exhibit design.
I love that. I love when museums have because I also feel like creating not that I have personally been part of creating an exhibit, so I want to be careful here because credit where credit is due. But my work experience working in a museum and being around of a lot of people who are in the process of currently making exhibits or have previously done so. Like I have such respect for the constraints placed on also exhibit making, like the physical space, also like the budgetary concerns, and then also like how do we make this kind of, do we want to even try to push boundaries, or like is that what we should do? Do we have the money for it? If so, like how do we do it? Where we want to go with it? Do we just want to like go full on create? Like what are we doing here? So like when museums have the time and money, and I would also kind of say courage to do something like that, I love it. So like regardless of whether or not I like the exhibit, I love the fact that they did something bonkers.
Exactly. No, I respect the heck out of the radical redesign of how they use their gallery space. I don't think it works, but I respect the attempt.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. So the exhibit opens with a 15-foot tall face, just to set the tone of what we're doing here.
Yeah.
I've got to say, I don't know if I would hate that in person, but I have to go see it. But I totally know what you mean, because there are several recent exhibits that I will not name names, but there are several recent exhibits that have been extremely radical, and I have loved them for their radicalness. And then I have walked into the exhibit, really tried to love it because I want to love it. And then I've walked through and I've just gone, this doesn't work. And I hate the fact that it doesn't work, but because if it had worked, it would have been fucking groundbreaking. But it doesn't do it for me. Fuck.
Exactly. The core problem I had with this exhibit is, right, the first 5 rooms out of a 6-room exhibit are all theatrical. So you've got headset is completely mandatory for this exhibit. They just hand you one at the start of it. And it's a wireless headset that connects to points throughout the galleries.
Oh, that's cool.
Just auto detects that based on
very
your
Black
location.
Mirror. I love that.
It is a little bit, and the tech almost worked perfectly.
Okay.
Yeah, I get that. That's
almost.
Yeah.
But yeah, you've got this actress in your ear that's just doing a dramatic reinterpretation of Völva, walking through these giant rooms full of overgrown mushrooms and like weird lava effects and big lighting things and 15-foot tall faces. And it's all very dramatic, and there is not a single artifact.
Oh, you know, I
missed opportunity there.
but I'm going to probably be controversial here to a degree, that I think that I don't know where I sit here, because I love going and seeing artifacts. But I'm really interested in this stuff, and sometimes when I go to a museum, and it's just all little, walls of artifacts, and you've got the little labels, it can become really boring, especially if it's
absolutely
big museum. And I love looking at it, and I really try to read all the big boards. I try to read all the things, and I try my best, but I struggle, and I'm really into this stuff. So if you're just a family that's kind of stumbled upon what can we do today, we're in Copenhagen, let's go to the museum, and you don't really know about it, this stuff has to be kind of a goal. That's like how you're going to pull people in, because it has that theatre, has that entertainment. It's not just here's some stuff, hopefully you maybe already know about it, maybe you've come here to see it. So
that's a really
I guess
good point, Dan.
That's kind of also for you, Adam, like with what you do, that I feel like that maybe disconnect people have to museums is now. We live in such a fast-paced society where everybody wants everything in fucking 30-second bites, and now 30 seconds is too long on for like Instagram reels. People don't want to watch 30 seconds, they want to watch 15 seconds, and they want you to get it across in 15 seconds, and it has to be entertaining, and you have to have a hook for the first 3 seconds, because otherwise they're swiping straight past that motherfucker. So people have this attention span that's so short that you give them a room of plaques, are probably not going to read it. So you need something that kind of is interactive, and this whole new way of getting information into people and pulling people in. And that is kind of taking this phone that everybody's obsessed with, and this device that we love, and these screens and this sound and this quick change, and somehow taking that and making that interesting in this big space, but also teaching you properly and not with little memes. That's my soapbox moment.
Fun fact with that. Research suggests that the average amount of time someone spends in front of any given art piece is between 6 and 10 seconds. This was true before the present day. So it's probably even lower now. So my exhibit labels, each little object label can have a maximum of about 100 words on it. Mm-hmm. You can tell people one fun fact about it, basically. That's it. And then you're done. But, right, you bring up a really good point, which is that the artifacts without, staging, without a lot of design, can get very overwhelming and feel very disconnected. So, after 5 rooms of incredibly theatrical, not a single artifact, not anything there, they stick you out in front of a male, probably warrior grave, that they've laid out on a pedestal, and you have an almost 200-foot-long straight shot to the end of the exhibit that is crammed with exhibit cases.
Oh, okay.
They put all of their artifacts, which is over 200 artifacts, in the last room.
Okay, do you think that's a case of that these artifacts need maybe special cases for temperature and I don't know, like
they absolutely do.
So
I mean, these are
can't be spread out.
It's the National Museum. They have budget to be able to spread some stuff out. They put a lot of money into these cases. Let's be very clear. But no, they wanted this overwhelming sense of material culture, a lot of which focuses on magic and mentality, some of which deals with Christianization and warfare and trade with the Byzantines, which sort of kind of tie into this
at once. Though you're like, I'm not against expecting a lot from visitors, because I think that's really cool that they don't spoon feed you everything. But it's also a lot to throw at someone, especially if they don't necessarily have a preconception of what the Viking Age even is to begin with.
Exactly. It's like they're trying to use the Sorceress as a lens to do a general exhibit about the Viking Age, because this is the primary Viking Age gallery at the National Museum these days. They redo them every few years. This one will close in 2027, and then after that, I assume they're going to do another Viking Age exhibit in that space. But they really wanted to do that general universal education with the sagas and the mythology and the material culture and this general history, and also do this incredibly theatrical production. And that felt to me like that pulls in two very different directions.
It's like they want to be very almost like, what's it called? They want to be very, for lack of a better term, theatrical, kind of very artsy about it, which is cool. I like that. But then also, but then like the sixth room, that got me really thinking, because that sounds extremely traditional. Extremely traditional, because before you introduced that room, I was thinking about the fact, that's why I said missed opportunity when you said that these 5 previous rooms were just like this theatrical, like both visual and auditory experience. The missed opportunity with not having artifacts there, from my point of view, is that I think that, to your point, Dan, about like going to museums and kind of getting bored about like seeing the same kind of artifact display cases, or like the way that things, like the lighting of the room, everything, like just having those little info plates, but then or info plaques, my bad, but at the same time, I then think that like there's something to be said for that having been a tradition for so long now. So if you come as a visitor and that's kind of your unconscious expectation, how do you blend whether or not you want to think of it as an unfortunate kind of traditional viewpoint, like this is what people's going to expect from museums, most likely, for our lifetime.
Absolutely.
So how do you blend that with an approach that is also kind of cool and maybe pretty weird, and then kind of how do you, I don't have an answer to that, but like I'm really interested to see how museums try to bridge that gap.
Right. It's been conversation since I started working in museums a decade ago, and has continued to be a problem with no clear-cut answers. So we see some really experimental things. But like, this is not an exhibit where visitors get to leave their mark, right? There's not a lot of active participation. You are sitting and you are watching a production, basically, or you're walking and you're watching a production, which is fascinating.
I think that is actually a really good thing. And I think that might frustrate you. But I think for the general public, that, because if you walk into, let's say again, the British Museum, you just kind of go, where the fuck do I start? As like somebody who knows nothing,
great question.
I don't know where to even begin. There's no markings on the floor. There's no, maybe in COVID there was, where you kind of got funneled through, and people probably really liked that, because if you have to kind of put yourself in a position of walking in there knowing very little, even though you might think you know a lot. Some people, they think they know a lot, but really they don't, and they're going to go in and they just kind of go, where do I start? And if you just let people wander, they'll just kind of miss stuff, and whatever's shiny or this thing over here looks cool. But if you can give them some direction, and I also think that having headset for everybody is a great thing. I think people will love that, because for me, I'm not a massive reader. I'm kind of getting into reading more now, but I've never really been a big fan of it. I think most people they just like the idea that somebody's just going to tell them the things in their ears. They don't have to try as much. Again, people are probably quite lazy these days, but it just being fed into the ear, you just kind of walk up to it. It's going to tell you about it, almost like you have a guide there that's going to say, this is this. We're going to tell us about it, rather than having to read this little plaque, and kind of guide you through the exhibition. I think that is a fantastic thing. I think a lot of people will really like that aspect of it, rather than kind of like off your pop, get in there, figure it out.
Right. I certainly agree with that. I really, like you said, this might be something I don't like. No, I think that's absolutely fair and true. And I think that last room really, when it's working well, it works really, really well. So there's TV screens along like one wall that are telling scenes from the sagas that largely intersect. So you have Laxdæla saga, you have Eirik saga Rauða, you have a scene in Fossbreiðar saga, I think. Several different saga scenes told up on the wall in like video animations that your headset connects to that are helping tell interactions from our primary literary record. You've got certain key artifacts that there's literally a giant glowing red string hanging from the ceiling that says this is an audio guide spot. If you walk close to this, your headset should connect to this and will give you that detailed, oftentimes 3 or 4 minute long breakdown of this one object. And that's all super cool. The problem is that like the density of material is so high that it is really overwhelming. And also, they had to relegate all of their object labels to a tablet next to each case.
Oh no!
So
that
if
means
you're
that
curious about
only
one of the things,
one person can interact with it at once. Then
only one person in one language can interact with any of the object labels that do not have an audio guide point.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And they just literally did not give themselves enough space to be able to provide object level interpretation next to each object.
I would imagine with a bigger budget, they would have different tablets. Because again, it's that bridging that gap between like the old museum and this modern era that we're in, and like tablets, the amount of you obviously doing your job, like not having to print a new label out, you can just edit it instantly, or being able to get more words on there if people want it. You can have like a little header of 100 words, and then every so often you get somebody who wants to know more, and they can click on it and it expands. That has to be an amazing feature, but it's having. But
also coding the tech for those tablets and making it all look pretty on an exhibit that scale is a 5-figure sum.
Okay. Right. All right.
Software development is ludicrously expensive in museums. It's probably more budget friendly to just print some paper labels.
But what gets me curious about that is that
you've got to hook people.
If you're already like you're wearing a headset and you have a possibility of, and I'm not saying that this is the correct answer. It's just I've always been curious about this, and I've never personally been in a space that does this. I've been in a space that does this to a certain extent, but not to like the full extent that I would be curious about whether or not this works. It's like, let's say that you have a display case like that where you have, give or take, a bajillion objects. I'm also like very curious about so you're already wearing your headset in the space and you have the possibility of interacting with this like museum tablet with its own like software design or whatever. But why not? Like I understand that the aesthetics of this might get difficult, but like why not have some sort of like QR code or something next to the object, or have like a main QR code by like each row or column or something, and then you could go into there and like pick your specific object via your own phone. Like most museums have open internet. Like I'm just so curious why these things aren't.
Max, that's so funny you said that, because that's controversial again, maybe. I'm not doing that. I don't know why. There's something about me having to scan something with my own phone and read it on my own phone whilst there. I'm not doing it.
No, I get it though. I get it. I get it.
I went for a walk. I went for a walk yesterday, and there was I can't remember where it was. It was on a National Trust site, and there was a cairn, like a burial cairn, and they put up little QR, rather than putting up like just a plaque with information on, they put a little QR code saying, if you want to know more about this, scan this. And I was like, motherfucker, I'm not doing that. I'm out for a walk. And then I'm not going to scan it and read it when I'm at home. I'm like, if you'd have put the plaque there, I 100% would have read it. I
Yeah.
love a plaque when I'm out walking, and it
Give
tells
me
me
a
about
good
what
plaque.
it tells me about
Exactly.
what's right in front of me. I'm reading it. But this little QR code, I'm like, well, I'm not going to do that. I'm out walking. I'm not going to scan down and stand here and read something on my own phone. It's the exact same thing. But for some reason in my mind, I was just like, not doing it. No.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely it, right? Lots of museums, especially large museums, are currently experimenting with QR codes and really trying to push them. I'm not a big fan of them, though an exhibit I put up literally a month ago has QR codes for little like supplemental video clips, which is kind of the only way to do that, short of having a tablet in the space, which was out of the exhibit budget. But, you know, museum audiences skew old. You know how many folks take a photograph of a QR code and they're like, why doesn't it work? So
Okay.
many people.
Yeah.
It's reliant on your internet working. If someone's on a weaker cell plan, or your Wi-Fi goes out, well, now your interpretation is dead. It's kind of an accessibility risk. Or accessibility issue, unless if you're signaling that there's a QR code somewhere, folks who are low vision may not process that as a QR code. And as a screen reader, might actually struggle with interpreting QR codes into plain text, depending on how you've got that architecture set up on the back end. So there's a lot of challenges that show up with QR codes that they feel like they solve a lot of problems. And then we actually start pushing on it, and I'm not persuaded they solve those problems as well as we want them, as well as museum professionals want them to.
Yeah.
But
I think they do work.
But can I say,
Just
I want the
go,
word.
go, go, go.
Let
Go,
me,
Max.
let me.
Go, Max.
Because the thing
You
is,
get it in there.
I'm not. Here's the fun thing. Even though I was the one who brought them up, I am not necessarily a big fan of QR codes myself, because I'm not necessarily the person who will pull up something. But the interest here for me is why museums, and I love the fact that you brought up the accessibility issue, Adam. The interesting point for me is that there is usually a one-way. Oh, I'm going to sound harsh here. Okay. Dan and I talked about this. I'm going to try to be more assertive and not have 100 disclaimers when I say stuff. Here we go. I feel like most museums have...
Cancelled.
I'm trying, okay? In my experience, historical museums specifically have a tendency to have like a one path to information dissemination in all exhibits. Usually it's textual, but it could also be auditory. So I love the fact that you brought up the accessibility issue, because I think that is a huge thing to think about, especially when you're thinking about like talking about QR codes. 100% that would be an issue for people with various like vision levels. But at the same time, in most exhibits that only have text plaques, they don't necessarily have an audio guide. And
no, absolutely.
And also, like, where are all like the there are no ASL interpreters or like kind of, what's it called? My English is quitting on me right now. What's it called? Braille? Is that the Braille? Thank you.
Yep.
Like Braille. There is
right there with you.
Yeah. So like my curiosity is just why can't, like, I'm not saying that QR codes are absolutely not the solution to everything, but why not have multiple ways of potentially getting access to the information in the exhibit is just my question.
Yeah. Nope. It's a great point. The answers are not exciting.
I know, and I don't
and
mind
staff resources, right?
100%. And I don't think that I don't mean to put you on the spot, Adam, specifically.
No. But you're asking the right question, right? And it's something, right? I and everyone I know spends a lot of time thinking about. How do we actually deal with accessibility in a more productive way? Because what we're doing isn't enough. Period, right? English language bias in U.S. museums, extremely strong. We've not been able to implement dedicated multilingual labels in my museum. It's a project that we did for some exhibits, but have not been able to do for all of them. We don't have resources to really create audio guides for every exhibit. So we rely on just large text, relatively good lighting, and then trust that screen readers work if we need them to. It's kind of the best we are sometimes able to do. I'm thinking about ways to do that better in this next round of exhibits. And what do we have money for? Because if we have like a headset system like what the Viking Sorceress use, I can't even begin to fathom how much money that cost.
Yeah.
That is an incredible technological investment. If that cost $100,000, I would not be surprised.
Yeah. And you're always going to have some dickhead who will just walk out with it on and be like, forgot, sorry.
Yeah, you have to have guards at the beginning and the end of the exhibit grabbing the headsets off of people.
Because people will.
And then cleaning them, sanitizing them, making sure you don't create a lice infestation if you've got kids.
Mm-hmm. If somebody drops, people will. You can never underestimate the stupidity of people as well. Somebody will break one probably like every other day.
Exactly, right. They'll wear out, the batteries will fail. Someone might drop one, etc. So you have to budget in replacements. Some back-end update breaks the whole system for God knows what reason. You have a power outage and your system gets fried.
What'd you do? Yeah.
All of these are risks that kind of have to be accounted for. And it's incredibly, right, the more complicated the system and the more accessibility tools you provide, the larger the support resources required to accomplish it become. And so there's a balance that I don't think museums are very good at navigating, but a balance that's super difficult to navigate.
Oh, 100%. It's super duper difficult. But what I'm curious about is like whether, because it's so difficult that, and again, I don't mean to put you on the spot here, Adam. But I guess it's just my professional pet peeves coming through too. After having been employed at a museum for like a decade now and seeing the same thing, like the same mistakes in my eyes, just like with no evolution necessarily happening. Mm-hmm. Where I'm like, but I wonder if the fact that it is so complicated almost makes people give up a little bit. Without even trying. And I'm like, do we know that this will be so much more expensive? Like maybe we'll do like a check and it'll turn out, 100% that is the case. But like, unless we try, we won't know.
Exactly. There is one other factor that I didn't mention, and that is curator blind spots. Right.
Absolutely.
Hi. Yeah, I'm a straight-ish, cis, white Midwestern guy. Like, I got gigantic blind spots in terms of access and museum visitor experience that I have to try very hard to account for. And there are many curators who, despite the best of intentions, do not account for that and do not have dedicated enough conversations about accessibility with people who actually, use those services. Like, I can ideate about what is good accessibility for a year, and then I can go and actually ask someone who's low vision, and they might give me a completely different answer, and I would have no way of knowing that before I went and asked them.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Jennifer and Kimbo said in the chat about how a lot of exhibits are too close together for wheelchair users.
Yep.
And that's something that I would never have thought of, and I've only just thought of it now because they mentioned it in the chat. I'm like,
right, right, because the museums will often go for the American with Disabilities Act minimum, which is 60 inches for any walkway, which is theoretically enough space to turn a wheelchair around.
Theoretically.
Emphasis on theoretically. Unfortunately, one of my recent exhibits kind of had to do that minimum because the number of objects and the amount of square footage I have in my gallery kind of made that a necessity. But generally speaking, plenty of them will go for the minimum they are legally allowed to get away with. And this is something Viking Sorceress really suffered from. Though the space between cases was super narrow.
Okay.
And so, they... do what they are legally required to do. But we want to get as much stuff in as we can. I want to get as much interpretation in as we can. And so, right, walkways are quote unquote wasted space. They're not, but it's easy to fall into that trap when you have an object list that's 500 objects long.
Especially also
and you want to get all of them in.
Especially also if all the curators are able-bodied.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. Literally, for a couple I've taken to, before I open an exhibit, let me grab one of our visitor services wheelchairs and just literally try and wheel it through the exhibit and see how comfy that is.
That's a good plan, actually.
Yeah.
It's not a fancy way of solving that problem, but it did catch a couple of things last time. So
yeah, at least it's an effort. At least
it's an effort, and I think it's a really good point. And it's interesting how like awfully recent this has become a thing too. Like the museum building I'm used to working in is old enough that it's also protected by a heritage law, so you can't really do major reconstruction work on the facade or like unless it's like flaws in like the plumbing or electricity. Like it's super difficult to work in the building, and we only have one elevator which services the employees. It services all like service, like deliveries, everything. And it's also the one that visitors have to use if they need to use an elevator. But it's not easily accessible. It's behind, a gate that you need to have a card access to. So you need to ask a security guard to get there. I remember we had an exhibit on the third floor. A few years ago that I was really excited to show my mom, and she uses either a wheelchair or crutches on a good day. I was like, it's on the third floor, but like I'm an employee, so like we can get to the elevator, but also we could just ask security. Like I wanted to make it clear to her, like, I know this is way out of your way and it's unnecessary and I'm sorry about it, but like we'll get access to it. But she was genuinely, and I understand this so much, she genuinely felt so discomforted by that she was like, I'll actually,
understandably so.
She told, and this broke my heart. She was like, I'll just use my crutches. And I knew that would mean that the rest of her day would be super painful because she chose to use the stairs, and it broke my heart.
Yeah.
I mean, unfortunately, that is still way too common, especially for older museums, right? Museums that were founded before modern, recognition of accessibility needs was around. And yeah, it sucks. It sucks, and we have not done a good job of really making those spaces as accessible as possible.
There we go. On that note, let's wrap up the main show, because I have some questions I want to ask and save in the Q&A. I have a really good one that I want to get to. I'm going to tease it here just because got to try to sell the Patreon, and I want to have a little chat about how important you think the actual artifacts are, and whether they'll become more or less important in the future as we go down the lines of things like virtual, VR, virtual reality headsets, and being able to maybe have a 3D version of something that we can manipulate and look at. Does the actual artifact even really matter anymore? And will people in general really care if they can have something? Because do they care that it's the real thing, or it's a replica, or something they can manipulate and look at with a headset on? Do we need the real one? And I think that's a fun chat we can have.
That's a really good question. At the highest level, I think the real artifact is about to become way more important. It's always been incredibly important. I think that only goes up.
Let's cut it there, though, and get more into it in the Q&A.
Yeah,
exactly.
To tease it.
Nice, Max.
Exactly. For the rest of that thought, join the Patreon.
That's it. Oh, there we go.
Adam, the best guest.
Yeah, so it's Patreon.com/Nordic Mythology Podcast. That's from £3 a month, which is not a lot for our little podcast we have here. Max, where can people find you?
They can find me on Instagram, ArcheoMags, Archeo with a K.
There you go. Adam, what about you? Do your social media side, your website? Where can people check you out?
So you can find my online work at ludohistory.com. Or, as I said, I am the curator of the Museum of Danish America, though all opinions expressed were mine, not the museum's, obviously.
Oh, nice.
I have to say it. But yeah, that is danishmuseum.org.
Perfect. For me, it's Daniel_Farrand1 or Horns Voting for the business. And then again, Nordic Mythology Podcast across the board, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. Hit the like, hit the follow, hit the bell, all that stuff. Show us the love. And yeah, this has been a lot of fun. It's like I say, we kind of went around the houses, get into the topic. But it's been a really interesting conversation. I've learned a lot when it comes to research. That research part that I didn't expect us to get into, I think is super important. I think that's a really kind of fun thing that we stumbled into there, because it's one thing that I've struggled with, just, like I say, finding guests for the podcast, a topic that I want to learn more on. I've really struggled to know what to trust, what to find. And I think that'll be really interesting for a lot of people. So I'm glad we kind of got to have that tangent at the start.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of my favorite topics to talk to folks about, so I'm so glad we kind of wandered into the weeds over there and then came back around.
Yes, and thank you for continuing to broaden our horizons and give us insight into how complex working in a museum is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. All right, let's wrap it up.